In 2024, Aramco signed a deal worth roughly $400 million over 4 years to become one of FIFA's top sponsors, covering both the 2026 Men's and the 2027 Women's World Cup. Aramco's customer base involves governments and multinational corporations. It can already sell almost every barrel it produces. It was even considered the most profitable company in the world in 2024. So what exactly can it advertise to you here? And the phenomena is pretty common. Formula One, rugby, the Premier League. Fossil fuel advertising in sport is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it's generally because these companies are attempting to purchase a social license. Globally, their names are usually attached to oil spills, land grabs, habitat destruction, and a lot of coordinated money.
Looked at the communications of these executives, their text messages, their emails. We saw Scott Sheffield try to coordinate with OPEC and say, hey, instead of us competing with you, why don't we all just agree to actually cut back production and keep prices high?
So Aramco, the state-owned oil company of a government that has restricted women's rights, funds instability across several regions, and orchestrated the murder and dismemberment of journalist Jamal Khashoggi and many more, has been handed the keys to cleanse its image on the world's biggest stage. But sports washing is really common, and it's not really why this is interesting. 8 months after this historic deal, FIFA officially declared Saudi Arabia as the sole host of the 2034 World Cup, a process that allowed them to be completely uncontested for the first time in history, and an effort led by this man, Gianni Infantino.
The FIFA World Cup 2034 will be Saudi Arabia. Mabruk. Mabruk.
He was a lawyer and an administrator before FIFA. He ran the legal department at UEFA, then became the right hand of its president, Michel Platini. Today, he is the most powerful man in the history of sport. And since the day he was elected, not one person has run against him, which is an incredible turnaround considering he was a last-minute replacement for his first election. In 2016, the FIFA presidency was Michel Platini's to lose. He was a French football legend with 3 Ballon d'Ors. Then 5 months before the vote, Platini was gone. Swiss prosecutors had found a payment in FIFA's books. It was 2 million francs moved from Platini's personal account and signed off by Blatter for advisory work that he had given 9 years earlier. They had called it a verbal agreement, but FIFA's ethics committee didn't really care what they called it, and both were slapped with a ban, which ended Blatter's reign and Platini's campaign on the same afternoon. 7 years later, admittedly, a Swiss court cleared them both of fraud. Platini has never believed that the timing was an accident. He spent the years since filing complaints about it.
Got some breaking news, very interesting breaking news as well, because just days before the World Cup kicks off, FIFA President Gianni Infantino is the subject of a criminal complaint from his former boss at UEFA, that's Michel Platini.
UEFA was in trouble. They needed a last-minute replacement, and Infantino was there at the right time. Now, he just had to win it. And FIFA elections are won in a very specific manner. FIFA governs 6 confederations, and under them are 211 national associations. Every one of them gets a single vote. So here, a small island nation has the same vote as Brazil or Germany for who gets to become FIFA president, which turns the whole thing into a numbers game. Infantino spent his 4 months campaigning country to country, leaving a ton of promises. More development money, a bigger World Cup, places for exactly the nations whose votes he needed, to a federation with a crumbling stadium or non-existent development systems. A guaranteed check from FIFA meant way more than any of these typical administrative overhaul discussions. But weirdly, this wasn't the first time this campaign had been used. 4 decades earlier, a Brazilian named João Havelange won FIFA in the same way, traveling the world, promising the small nations more, and beating an apartheid-sympathetic FA president everyone assumed was safe. He riled up angry members and promised money to the desperate ones, promising an increase to 24 teams from the traditional 16. He then ran FIFA for 24 years and was later found to have taken millions off of a marketing deal that he built himself. He also famously kicked Pele out of a FIFA World Cup draw because he called his son-in-law corrupt. But yeah, a very similar campaign, and two very successful ones. After 2 rounds of voting, the substitute had walked out as the president of FIFA, and he came in as the reformer, the man who would lift FIFA out of the dark ages of football. After 2015, the indictments and the raids, FIFA had promised the world that it would never happen again.
We will restore the image of FIFA and the respect of FIFA, and everyone in the world will applaud us.
And the reforms were real. The executive committee was abolished and replaced with a larger FIFA council. Term limits for the president and the council were introduced. Senior salaries would be published, and a minimum of 6 women would be sitting on the council at all times, with the standing committees cut from 26 to 9. Integrity checks were tightened, and most importantly, the advisory bodies were made completely independent from FIFA's council. Although, as much as he'd like you to believe it, none of these rules were written out by him. Not directly, at least. A FIFA reform committee was enacted in August 2015, a 12-member group that decided all of these changes, along with the Audit and Compliance Committee chairman Domenico Scala. In February 2016, when he was elected president, these changes came along with him. Infantino was reportedly not a big fan of Domenico Scala. It was probably because Scala controlled the president's pay. They reportedly even clashed furiously behind the scenes. Blatter had taken a reported $3 million USD plus $12 million in bonuses after the success of the Brazilian World Cup. The salary was cut to $2 million in total, which is what makes his next move incredibly interesting. Just before the first FIFA Congress since his coronation, Infantino had set up a meeting with the newly elected FIFA Council, one that wasn't officially recorded. I did not accept the proposal. It was a proposal I found insulting. He said this according to a report by German newspaper FAZ, based on secret recordings of the meeting. FIFA didn't deny those meetings were real, by the way. In a conversation with Le Matin Dimanche, Infantino said, I assume very angrily, I would like to know how minutes and recordings of council meetings could end up in the papers. That same day, the FIFA Council sneaked in a last-minute measure that would temporarily allow the council to appoint or dismiss anyone within that year, taking away the responsibility from the member nations. Scala quit in protest almost immediately after. In a statement, he said that with this decision, it will be possible for the council to impede investigations against single members at any time by dismissing the committee members or keeping them quiet through threats of dismissal. FIFA responded, saying that it was just a big misunderstanding. But just 1 year later, this policy was used to remove independent committee members. In 2017, the Russian Football Federation appointed Vitaly Mutko as a potential representative to the FIFA Council, a move that was objected by the Governance Committee and its chairman, Miguel Maduro.
The election for the FIFA Council of Mr. Mutko. But in that case, there was indeed an attempt to try to influence our decisions. I mean, when we were deciding on the eligibility of a candidate for a FIFA Council, that is at the same time the deputy prime minister of a country that is organizing the World Cup in 1 year, we are certainly aware of the sensitivity of that. But one thing is to be aware of how sensitive that is. The other thing is not to apply the rules for that reason. That's a very different thing. And that I was not ready to do.
This is Miguel speaking on an unusual meeting with the Secretary General, Fatma, after the committee's conclusion.
And in that meeting, the Secretary General made clear that it was extremely problematic. More than that, she said that we needed to find a solution to declare Mr. Mutko eligible, because otherwise the presidency itself would be in question. The World Cup would be a disaster. That was her view, and as a consequence, the continued presidency of Mr. Infantino would also be in question.
This was a sentiment that was also echoed by the president, who he mentioned in this case objected to their conclusion as well. According to him, Their priority was the stability of the Russian World Cup and Infantino's position as president, not the fact that the deputy prime minister of Russia, a government official, would be joining the ranks of decision makers and regulators of global football. In May 2017, the FIFA Council decided not to renew Maduro's appointment, and other members of his committee quit in protest.
Think about the following parallel. Again, if you will wake up one day in a state and you will have the Attorney General or the Queen's prosecutor, the President of the Supreme Court, or in countries that will have the Constitutional Court, the President of the Constitutional Court, all removed from one day to the other. And some of them, as in my case, with less than 10 months in office. How would we read this?
But they weren't done yet. FIFA's own independent ethics judges, Eckert and Warbely, opened a preliminary investigation into allegations that Infantino and Fatma Samora had improperly intervened to push for Ahmad to become the new CAF president, ousting Issa Hayatou in the elections. So what happened to that investigation among the many that they were working on?
FIFA's ruling council terminated the services of Chief Ethics Investigator Cornel Borbely and Ethics Judge Hans-Joachim Eckert.
And it's a setback for the fight against corruption. The Ethics Committee is weakened and incapacitated. FIFA will suffer because of this.
New judges came in eventually for what they called to be geographic and gender diversity, and the case was put in the backdrop despite, ironically, Ahmad being charged with corruption just 3 years later. In 2018, in meetings held behind closed doors, Infantino's FIFA Council approved the first overhaul of the Code of Ethics since the scandal. In the New English edition, the word corruption disappeared completely from the title of the section governing bribery. FIFA later dismissed the omission as a misunderstanding, made for reasons of language clarity. Additionally, despite enacting a very strict 12-year statutory limit on presidential terms after the scandal, the FIFA Council ruled that Infantino's first 39 months spent finishing Sepp Blatter's disgraced term didn't count towards his limit. This loophole legally clears the way for Infantino to run again well into the next decade, which also applies to the FIFA Council members as well. And Infantino has made it clear.
As you've heard, that the electoral period for the presidential election at FIFA starts today, I want to confirm to you that I will be candidate for the election of FIFA president next year. Thank you very much.
It really felt like Infantino and the new FIFA Council had come in and immediately started to push the boundaries of what the new laws meant to reform FIFA, and slowly they were realizing nobody was around to push back. But even then, they weren't done. A new 10-year statute of limitations was quietly slipped into the code. Under the previous rules, prosecution for bribery and corruption was completely exempt from any expiration date. The new clause meant that any misappropriation of funds or backroom deals older than a decade could no longer be legally prosecuted, at least in FIFA's eyes. Weird position for the reformer of FIFA to have, unless the reformer had something to hide himself. In 2020, Swiss investigators found something odd in the diary of their own Attorney General. Michael Lauber was the most powerful prosecutor in Switzerland, and at the time, his office was running criminal investigations into FIFA. Any contact with FIFA officials was supposed to be logged, recorded, above board. But investigators found that Lauber and Gianni Infantino had met in secret 3 times. Infantino wasn't even under investigation directly, which made the secrecy a lot more strange. Conveniently, when placed under oath, neither the Attorney General nor the FIFA president could recall a single detail of what they discussed in that 3rd meeting. And we'll never know, because the case died. Despite Lauber resigning in disgrace, the prosecutor who took over the investigation, Stefan Keller, was removed after Infantino's side argued he was biased. He put out too many press releases related to the matter. Making Qatar or Russia a World Cup host was not Infantino's decision. But he might have stood by it because the alternative meant denying the ridiculous amount of money that FIFA risked by delaying or taking action, And he would have even more enemies in dictators and monarchs. He defended them probably because his paycheck depended on it. The financial incentive to become president is enormous. As of 2025, 10 years after being assigned a $2 million salary, he has tripled that amount to $6 million. More than half of his potential bonuses are now tied directly to FIFA's commercial revenue. So when you see the World Cup expanding to 48 teams, or see dynamic ticket pricing rolled out to charge fans more depending on the day, you could just be watching a president of a nonprofit maximizing his own payouts. He'd also launched the FIFA Forward program, which meant member nations were taking in, as of today, 7-fold the amount that they used to before 2016. A president that has provided serious money like that isn't going to be ousted from office easily, which probably explains why he was uncontested for almost 10 years now, and probably won't be for the next election as well.
FIFA is beholden to 211 Gianni Infantinos, other football presidents. And what do? What do you give them? You give them gifts. You wonder who's going to change. Why is football not asking for change? Because I'll give you an example. Just now, the day after the opening game in Mexico City, where all of the football world were invited, so presidents and the senior hierarchies of each of these national federations, come to Mexico City, stay in a lovely hotel, and come to the opening game of the World Cup. And you think, okay, that's great. But that's not all you get. Then get on a plane. We're going to fly you to Miami. 5 days at the Ritz-Carlton in Miami. Enjoy, guys. And guess what? Gianni Infantino is going for re-election next year. Just remember that.
Again, those World Cups were not his decision. But what comes next was completely in his control. Qatar 2022 had worked. For FIFA and Infantino, at least. A tiny, cash-rich state had run a World Cup, absorbed all the criticism, and paid its bills. He'd even moved his own family to Doha for the tournament, and spent one afternoon lecturing the West for daring to judge the hosts.
I have very strong feelings, I can tell you that.
But somebody else was watching, and they were really interested in having one of their own. For Infantino, the kingdom was a perfect partner, one of the deepest pockets on earth, and an endless supply of money to keep his voters loyal. There was only one problem. Under any normal process, Saudi Arabia would have to submit a bid against very competitive footballing nations. The next tournament, 2030, was already a huge contest. One side was a joint European-African bid, Spain, Portugal, Morocco, and on the other was a very sentimental one. Uruguay, Argentina, and Paraguay were attempting to bring the World Cup back to South America, where it all began in 1930, 100 years on. Saudi Arabia had teamed up with Egypt and Greece to join them in competing against these huge opposition. Despite the controversy of luring Greece off another bid that they were committed to by using apparent promises of funding for stadium development, they withdrew because the Euro-African bid had really good backing from all of the member nations. Infantino, however, had an epiphany. He was already under pressure because South America really wanted the World Cup for their 100-year celebration. So FIFA approached South America with a token gesture. What if Uruguay, Argentina, and Paraguay hosted the first 3 opening matches on home soil, after which the entire tournament would pack up and fly across the Atlantic to Europe and Africa for the remaining games? The South American officials were ecstatic. I assume because they wouldn't have to hold the brunt of the financial burden of hosting while promoting it as a sentimental World Cup. So they accepted. And as such, an unprecedented 3-continent, 6-nation mega event that left everybody happy was negotiated. But out of all of this, FIFA and Infantino got something that they were never willing to admit: an incredible opportunity. FIFA has a specific law that's directly related to this decision. Under the continental rotation rules laid out by FIFA, the moment those opening matches are kicked off in South America, any nation within that continent, alongside Europe and Africa, was officially unable to bid for the next 2 World Cups. Since CONCACAF members are hosting the 2026 World Cup, they're also ineligible to bid for 2030. Saudi Arabia now only has to compete against Oceania and other Asian nations for a bid to host the 2034 World Cup. And their biggest concern then was Australia, a fellow AFC member who was actively preparing a very competitive, fully funded bid to host the 2034 World Cup. And before this, none of these situations directly implied that FIFA wanted Saudi Arabia to win. But what they did next could only be described as just that. FIFA reduced the time allowed for a country to bid an official offer with full backing from 3 years to just 25 days. The only time something even close to this has been seen before is in 1983, when Colombia withdrew from hosting due to the economic crisis and an emergency replacement was required. It is a logistical impossibility for a democratic nation like Australia to pass legislation, secure billions in government funding guarantees, and compile a massive stadium blueprint in less than a month. But Saudi Arabia was ready. Despite the lack of infrastructure in both hospitality, FIFA standard stadiums, a lack of a clear plan for the intense summer heat, or even a definitive date range for the games, FIFA gave Saudi Arabia's bid 419.8 out of 500. The best evaluation score any World Cup bid has ever received. The strategy worked flawlessly. Australia withdrew on the final day, leaving Saudi Arabia uncontested. And for another first time in history, the announcement for the hosting rights for the World Cup had changed venue. On December 11, 2024, FIFA conducted an extraordinary Congress that was held entirely on Zoom. In reality, if Infantino tried to finalize the voting, they apparently had to vote, even with one bidder. During that year's in-person Congress, a convention hall in Zurich would have brought hundreds of international journalists, human rights watchdogs, dissenting nations, protesters, all under the same roof. The digital format eliminated the possibility of any floor debates or public protests, because according to FIFA statutory rules, an extraordinary Congress is strictly prohibited from veering off topic. Only the specific items pre-written into the official agenda by Infantino's administration can be brought to the floor. And so the media rage sparked very briefly and then vanished. A very stark contrast to the explosive, uncontainable chaos of the 2011 announcements. And before this announcement, Infantino had finalized the multi-million-dollar partnership with Saudi Aramco.
Not just in relation to World Cup bidding, but other things which FIFA does, they're not a lot more transparent. They've developed policies, they've got great PR, they spend an awful lot on legal costs, but there's not a whole lot more transparency, and you still have a president who's extraordinarily powerful, just like Sepp Blatter was, and who is very keen to get his own way on a number of things, such as who are going to be the next World Cup host. They're almost, despite the vote, which is there for show, it's almost a one-man decision.
And this is where things really confuse me. Why Saudi Arabia? Why this consistently and recklessly? It couldn't be because of sponsorship money. Almost every company on earth wants to be attached to FIFA commercially.
The rainbow.
Well, in 2018, facing his first re-election, Infantino had walked into the FIFA Council with an offer. $25 billion from a mystery consortium to buy the rights to a revamped Club World Cup and a brand new Global Nations League. He refused to name the investors under confidentiality, and then he gave the council 60 days to take it or leave it. So who has $25 billion lying around? The consortium turned out to be built around the Japanese SoftBank Investment Advisors, and the single largest investor in SoftBank's fund was $45 billion from the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Saudi Arabia. You've probably heard of the Public Investment Fund, or the PIF. This is the Saudi state's sovereign wealth fund, somewhere north of $900 billion, which has spent the past few years buying its way into every sport that would have it. Newcastle United, Live Golf, the Saudi Pro League, where Ronaldo was reportedly paid $200 million a year to move to Riyadh, and quietly a stake in a streaming platform called DAZN. The Guardian had reported that Infantino had met the king over 4 times in that same year. And since he was seeking elections the very next year, it meant that he had to deliver on his promises of financial funds to the member nations very soon. This deal died under very heavy European backlash, as UEFA might have been afraid it would take revenue away from their Champions League. The contact, however, didn't end. Per the Play of the Game reporting, the ties between Infantino and Mohammed bin Salman were built steadily from 2018 onward. In 2021, Infantino met MBS at a Gulf summit. FIFA's own press release framed it around football as a uniting factor and praised Saudi's progress on women's football. Later that year, Infantino informally wanted a World Cup every 2 years. And guess who formally puts that proposal on the Congress floor? The Saudi Football Federation. UEFA and the IOC killed it, but the pattern was there. More tournaments, more money, but in one form or another, Saudi backing. March 2022, Infantino flew to Riyadh to meet MBS again, at the exact moment he's under fire for his closeness to Putin. And then in 2025, the plan the council rejected in 2018 finally arrived.
The Club World Cup will be lucrative for teams, and funding seems to flow back to Saudi Arabia. It was secured around the same time as the kingdom was picked as host of the 2034 World Cup. At the time, FIFA was struggling to sell the Club World Cup broadcast rights. Then streamer DAZN stepped in with a $1 billion deal. Then DAZN sold a 10% stake in the company for $1 billion to a firm owned by Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, PIF.
The same competition Infantino had tried to sell to Saudi-backed money 7 years earlier. The tournament run in the United States that summer. 32 teams, a prize pool of around $1 billion, and financially underwritten by Saudi money. And luckily, too, because that tournament was not selling tickets. I watched that Club World Cup final live because the team I support was in it. They won it, actually, and when they lifted the trophy, the President of the United States was unfortunately standing in the middle of the celebration. Which brings us to another relationship Infantino spent 2025 building. He'd met Trump at Mar-a-Lago. He attended the January inauguration. By July, FIFA was renting office space in Trump Tower, and in May, he arrived 3 hours late to FIFA's own annual Congress in Paraguay. The one meeting that is, on paper, the entire point of his job. Eventually, a group of European officials, including the UEFA president, got up and walked out. And where was their president?
Infantino had been with Trump in Qatar and Doha this week with the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, as well as the Qatar Emir.
When asked about their relationship, he responded that it was essential ahead of next year's World Cup. Then in December 2025, at the World Cup draw, FIFA invented something. They called it the FIFA Peace Prize and handed the first one to Donald Trump.
That you can wear everywhere you want to go.
The rights group Fair Square filed a formal complaint, calling the FIFA Peace Prize an egregious abuse of power. And honestly, the complaint asks the only question that matters. What exactly qualifies the governing body of football to hand out prizes for peace?
Cuba says it's on the verge of collapse and blames Donald Trump's administration for committing a genocide against the Cuban people. Data from the Cuban government shows the infant mortality rate doubled since the start of the year, and the survival rate of children battling cancer dropped by 20%.
Nothing does, but it is a very useful gift to give to the host of your next World Cup. It's to the point where Infantino is taking calls from Trump multiple times on decisions made by referees in order to overturn red cards. After these phone calls, Infantino said an independent panel had reversed a red card for the USA striker, a move that has only happened one other time in the history of the World Cup, and was also mired in controversy. But this is where it all culminates. On November 24th, 2025, FIFA signed a partnership with the Saudi Fund for Development, the Kingdom States Development Finance Institution. Under this deal, the fund will offer loans and financing to FIFA's member associations to build football infrastructure. Infantino had called it a crucial step in ensuring our member associations have the facilities to make football truly global. It was sealed around a White House meeting between Trump and Mohammed bin Salman, a triangle of power, as one outlet put it, between the US administration, the Saudi monarchy, and FIFA.
Because it is the truth. You don't need people to compliment you, Mr. President, but this World Cup would not have been such an incredible success without you.
This relationship is much more complicated than the Aramco sponsorship. Here, the money flows through FIFA itself and out to the member associations, the same members whose votes decide who runs FIFA. The man they keep re-electing, unopposed, is now the man who arranged their line of credit. And while the money moved, the bill for 2034 started arriving.
A report published by Human Rights Watch has warned of a surge of deaths of migrant construction workers in the Gulf country. Workers have fallen from heights, been electrocuted, and even crushed or decapitated by heavy machinery.
On March 12, 2025, The Guardian reported that the first migrant worker death tied to the tournament had occurred. His name was Mohammed Arshad. He was from Pakistan, and he died working on the Aramco Stadium in Khobar, trying to provide for his 3 young sons. He will join the reported 6,500 migrant workers from South Asia who died in Qatar in the decade after it won the bid. All of them under unacceptable working conditions and a framework that's defined as the Kafala labor system. It's one where Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other Gulf states tie a migrant worker's legal residency and visa directly to their employer. Under the system, the employers hold near total control over workers, meaning employees couldn't change jobs, they couldn't travel abroad, or exit the country without their sponsor's explicit permission.
This video was a lot longer than I thought it would be, and yet I still couldn't cover everything. Things like Infantino's blatant disregard for fans under his ticket pricing model.
Afford tens of thousands of dollars for a ticket. Your friend Donald Trump said he wouldn't pay $1,000 for a ticket. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said it's unacceptable for fans to be exploited. Are Trump and Starmer wrong, or do you apologise to fans who feel ripped off and priced out, and will you look to ensure that prices do come down and never as high again?
Or the multiple corruption scandals that have gone under FIFA's watch, completely uninvestigated.
This time, the Argentine Football Association is under preliminary investigation by the FBI and the US Department of Justice. Argentinian media report investigators are examining whether more than $300 million that passed through major US banks involved money laundering or bank fraud.
Independent committees being brazenly influenced.
And was suspended after Trump phoned Infantino to complain.
Yes, I asked for a review by FIFA.
When that decision was made to lift the automatic ban, which is an unprecedented action, it was done by one person and one person only, from what I'm told. Chairman Mohammed al-Kamali of the United Arab Emirates. The committee was neither informed nor consulted.
And scams that are targeted at people's deepest vulnerabilities.
ADI Predict Street is a prediction marketplace where users can trade on the outcome of sporting events. It was only founded in March 2026, yet it's already one of FIFA's top sponsors.
It didn't genuinely exist when they were in talks with FIFA, and they became a partner for a really considerable sum of money. We're talking about $150 million US. It came.
You talked about this. That was a huge moment.
Yes.
You're seeing the most powerful football executives being yanked out of beds at 6 a.m. in a luxury Swiss hotel, obviously, and then being taken out, perp walked, taken to New York, and we have the biggest scandal in sports. And here we are 10 years later. And the film that I think of every time when I think of FIFA is Terminator 2. The kind of that villain who couldn't be killed, the other Terminator.
Right.
Or T-1000, I think he was called, where he would just reformulate.